I know that we always say we don't want to be like our parents, but do you think at some capacity we do it anyway?
I think we fight to not be like a certain part of our parents. For me, it would be like yelling and outbursts towards my kids.
Is there a timeout in you guys' household? How is the timeout, and what are your thoughts about that?
And trial and error. Everything's about trial and error. So right now, the way we discipline our kids is we notice that it's just a takeaway system, but being strict and stern, having that it's like the volume, right? Having the volume go right, like loud enough to like, okay, they're serious. I just wish I had more community. That really was the end of it. I wish that I had more mom friends and just people to grow with.
Yeah.
I didn't know why I felt so lonely sometimes. I didn't know why like I was so angry sometimes, or I was so down on myself sometimes, and I was like, is this hormones? I knew none of that.
Hi mama, you're doing amazing. I know the challenges of navigating through postpartum life, and I'm here to be a village in a world where the village is often missing. My name is Elo, and I'm the host of the New Mom in Town, the Postpartum podcast. Today's guest is Nari. She's a mom of 3 with a child education background who's invested in being a stay-at-home mom while putting her career on hold. On this episode, we explore a possible root cause of postpartum depression and discuss how generational trauma can affect our parenting style, even when we swear we won't be like our parents. Let's get into it. Postpartum depression, what would you say is the root of it?
The root, I would say, is first-time mom, first-time parent. I feel like you don't really realize it until later because you're so into giving birth and all that new process, but it's mostly losing a huge part of your individuality, your identity. You know, I'm sure, like at least for me, I was very confident in who I was. I knew what I was good at, what I was not good at, and relationship tendencies. All of a sudden, you're a mom, and there's this new entire role that you don't know about. And so, number one, you lose a huge chunk of that individuality or that identity in order to gain this brand new role that you just question marks all over. And so I think for a lot of new time moms in particular, aren't aware of that because you're more focused on, oh my gosh, there's this child, need to make sure they're alive, eaten, fed, slept, you know, and you immediately lose yourself. And so I would say that might be the root cause of it, yeah. And I think postpartum depression is such a sneaky one, and it's very undermined because it's very hard to talk about. Like we can't really talk about it for a lot of reasons, but for me personally, I think it didn't actually hit me. I have 3 kids. I have a 6-year-old, a 3.5-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and it didn't hit me until like my 3rd pregnancy.
Wow.
Like literally, like it was this one big wham of like emotion, sensitivity, and I just started to react and respond, and I was just so shocked because I was like, oh, I got this, you know, I'm learning this idea of motherhood, and I'm learning a little bit more about myself, but all of a sudden, like my 3rd pregnancy, I was just like, it was just really difficult for me. So I think it really depends on the person, you know. It's different for everyone. It either happens right away, right after their first time as a mother, or who knows, after 3, 4, 5 kids, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely real.
Yeah.
It's definitely there, but it's not talked about enough.
At all. And I think how you said it's different for everyone. I felt like I didn't have postpartum depression the first couple, I would say, months. I mean, maybe my husband says differently, but for me, I felt like what I was feeling was normal because I was just crying. There's just all these emotions.
Right.
I don't think postpartum depression, quote unquote, I put it on in quotes because it's not depression per se, like the depression we all know. It's different. There's so many different factors to it. But I don't think it hit me until, like, I was 4, 5, 6 months into postpartum because that's when I kind of realized, like, dude, this is the new you. And it's so hard to kind of being okay with it and finding the new you out and like what are you gonna do and how are you gonna navigate through that. So yeah, I think postpartum depression can again happen at any time. So the fact that it took you 2 pregnancies, do you think you were just because you were saying you were independent, you knew like your life and what you wanted, do you think because of that, not hard-headedness, but that independency, you were masking your postpartum depression?
Yeah, it's definitely because I was stubborn. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I was the type, or I am the type to be like, okay, I know this is present because, you know, you see it whether on social media and whatnot. This is very there, but I'm like, that's not gonna happen to me. But I think it's also a natural instinct because when you are a first time parent, you have protective instincts. And so all you think about is like staying strong.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to be weak. It's so hard to show weakness, especially as the kids get older. You're like, oh my gosh, like now all the nitty gritty, like the dirty stuff is coming out. And so it's so easy as parents or as a mom to not want to expose that, but no matter what, at the same time, you realize, okay, it's coming out anyway, you know?
Right.
And I think that's when I realized, like, I had to kind of see my actions before thinking about, like, whether, like, my mental health or, like, whatever I'm thinking of. I realized, truth be told, that as the kids are getting older, I'm showing more anger towards my kids or my husband, and, like, all these things are being lashed out, and I can't control myself. So that's when I think, okay, there's something going on. Oh my goodness, maybe it's this thing called postpartum depression. But again, I think everyone else is different. It's also based on how well you express your emotions. I'm not really good at that, I think, or it takes me a long, long time. But part of it is probably because as a first-time mom, you're just focused on the child or focused on your family or this new dynamic that you have to create. And then your partner as well. You know, you guys are both people are thinking about their own, I guess, way of how we're going to create a family and whatnot. And so it was a little bit delayed, I would say. Yeah.
How do you think then can one kind of navigate through this new identity?
Right. So I think the way I personally navigated, which I wouldn't recommend, is like I just was trying to do it by myself. Like, well, and I think our case, we were just from the East Coast and we moved in between all these times. And so we didn't have family or friends around. And, you know, you mentioned how, like, you have best friends too, but creating mom friends is the most important thing in this time. And I completely agree because I wish I did. But then because we were so focused on all these big decisions that we had to make during the time, like we didn't have that community. And so I was like, the feeling that I felt was like, oh, it's just survival. I just need to get through it. And eventually they'll be big enough and I'll find myself again. But now I'm in this interesting place where my third is old enough, where we have a little bit of room to like look into ourselves, look into my relationship with my husband. And we start to see all the problems that we didn't like deal with at the time it just all came out at once. And so that is not what I would recommend. I think what I really would recommend is finding a good community and reaching out and not doing it alone. I think it's very easier said than done, though.
Right.
To say, just reach out, you know, you're not by yourself, you know? Because that loneliness is such a sneaky one. You know?
Very sneaky one.
Yeah.
So how is the dynamic with you and your husband with your 3 kids now?
So I would say the first year around with our first child, it was a bit lighter only because it's just one kid and you get to kind of create this new canvas and new painting of like what our family will be like. So it was like a blissful honeymoon stage, I like to say. And then we had our second child and dynamic changed because at first you're only invested on one, and then second you're doing, okay, you take him and I'll take her, or we'll switch. And so immediately there's this wall that you create between each other, between you and your husband or you and your partner, because you're just in like, again, survival mode, and whatever that particular child needs, you do that and then I'll do this. And so that was a different dynamic. And then our third dynamic is more like, okay, we know what chaos is. Like we kind of understand this idea of parenting. We know like how to kind of loosen up a little bit on certain areas. So it's a little bit easier, I would say, when it comes to parenting dynamic. So now it's been good, but I would definitely say that the first to second transition with the first child, second child was the toughest stage. But again, everyone's experience is very different. It really depends on how involved your husband and partner is. and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So, yeah.
So would you say, because I know that they always talk about like the roommate stage, especially like with the first baby. So with the second baby, you literally said there was a wall. So there's definitely like a roommate stage for you guys.
Yep.
And what would you recommend for a new parents or new parents that are about to be parents of two to do to not be in that roommate stage and have this huge wall?
Yes. I remember when my husband, we had this one conversation with we only had 2 kids then, complete survival mode. We sat down, we're like, we're gonna get through this. And we're just gonna, it's like running a marathon next to each other. We're just gonna run. We're just gonna run, do our own thing. We'll be okay. We didn't go on date nights because you can't. We didn't do anything extravagant because we knew it won't work. It won't happen. And we're like, oh, we're fine. We're okay with that. Third time come around and we both realized, okay, we're roommates. We who just have 3 kids, and you and I are not even friends anymore. It's like, what on earth happened? It really was just like a shock that all of a sudden we looked at each other and we're like, you're in a really funky stage right now. And so my recommendation now, and what we're actually honestly trying to do, because I will say right now we are kind of in the roommate, but like trying to be friends again stage, is to do the small things. So when you're like while you're parenting, don't just look at the child, but look at each other and see how each other are doing. Even if you're like watching a movie together, it's the very small, like hold each other's hands or give each other a hug once in a while. Like right now, that's really immediately building it for us, at least. Instead of you don't expect like grand date nights or things like that, which is very difficult. Or just acknowledging each other's needs.
Yeah.
I think I could maybe quote it now. I remember I went to this talk and the person who gave the talk said this amazing thing. This was before we had kids, where he was like, if I care about you and I'm looking at you, but you're looking at yourself, a relationship is never going to work. But if you're looking at me and I'm thinking about myself, that's not going to work either. But if both people are looking at each other and looking at each other's needs and caring for one another, that relationship will always work. And I feel like whether it's friendships or partnerships or marriage, whatnot, that's the case. But especially in a marriage where you have kids, kids add on to that. You only think about the kids. It's not like I'm looking at myself, I'm looking at the kids. And that seems more important. But again, like after a while, we realized, oh no, like the kids see us. They base their relationships and behaviors on us too. And whether it's we get into arguments or, whether we're in good or bad times, they see it. And so you also have to be in a good place in your relationship, So we really thought about it and we're like, okay, well, we were really stuck at one point, but it's really those small acts of, whether it's romance or kindness or whatever it is, like that's been helpful.
So there's like the book, and we all know about this, the 5 love languages. And would you say maybe it would be like a good idea to kind of bring that back in? And I'm only saying this because I feel like I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm sure a lot of other parents out there know what we're talking about. So sometimes we do forget what the other person needs, and we're not just talking like intimacy needs, okay? Just regular needs of like words of affirmations or like the little touch on the knee or things like that, which I do agree with you are a huge starter for kind of like getting back into that relationship you had previously.
It's very interesting to say that because we tried that in the past, and I think maybe it's like when you're a parent, again, you can't read a book, that's one thing, but it doesn't, like, it depends. But I think in our case, we didn't want to make it not as organic. We wanted to like happen just naturally, but it does help, I think, number one. We did have a conversation like a couple of months ago about each other's needs and like very particular needs and why those needs matter. And mine would be, for example, words of affirmation is what they would say in the books. But it's the way you speak to me. Or if we did something while we got into a fight, I'm sorry, goes a long way for me. And then for him, it would be just like acts of touch, a small hug or whatnot. But again, we didn't really either have time to talk about it, except that one special time moment. So I think it's hard to talk about because you're so consumed with everything else. So the way that we, I guess, went about it was my husband and I first, or just naturally, I think in a relationship, especially when you're so consumed by kids, you naturally try to do things for the other person, but you do it in what you're used to. So for example, my husband comes from a household where they're very, like, they don't use their words to express their love at all. They use their actions, like service. So in the books, it would be acts of service. And he would either cook a dinner, like if we get into a fight, for example, he would cook a dinner, or he would like start the car, or things like that, right? Truth be told, like for me, like and it sounds like I acknowledge it, I'm like thankful, but if we get into a fight and you want to make up for it, for me, what works is like, just say I'm sorry, you know, but that, again, has been something that we're clear of now, but in the moment you're in the tornado of motherhood, parenting, like you don't think about that. No. You just completely neglect the other person's actions. You don't care about what they do. You only care about what your kids do, and you think about the parenting styles and all about the kid. So that's why I say the book might not work, because it's so at the time, because it's so hard to think about each other first.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that's the main thing. You just push that to the side, and then you only think about the kid, and then later on it's just like, oh shoot, okay, now let's think about each other. So like, but you know, I think I hope, or I wished that we did have more conversations where we could kind of talk about it, but sometimes it gets to an argument, right? Sometimes it's hard to like understand each other and why these things are important, and sometimes it's not worth writing about because you have to take care of your kid. But yeah, so like it's a whole bundle of things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, sometimes I feel I need time to cool off from my rage.
Right.
I know that we always say we don't want to be like a parent, but do you think at some capacity we do it anyway?
I think we fight to not be like a certain part of our parents. For me, for example, like I always say, I don't want to be like, and because of this certain action. And I wouldn't say who, but for me it would be like yelling and outbursts towards my kids, right? When I'm not patient, and because I grew up from a very loud family. My family's really loud, his family's super quiet, you know, and so it's so easy to just express our emotion in outbursts. And I always tell myself, I'm not gonna be like that, or I'm not gonna be lazy, you know, because I see that in my parents. But then you end up seeing it anyway. And so I think what helped me was to first admit that it's gonna happen anyway. It's gonna just come out. That way you can put the mess on the table and know how to clean it up. Like if you don't see the mess, then how are you gonna clean it up, right? And so, and I think we especially come from a time or a generation where, we realize these things can, like, we can actually talk about these things. Whereas like my parents,
taboo.
They just did whatever, they just ran with it because, like, you know, they were immigrant parents. So it's all about survival, all about making money and making sure we survive. But now we have the blessing to actually talk about it and say, okay, well, let's see what's better for our mental health and what we can learn from our parents and what we maybe try not, which we try to fight against and try to not bring into our family. But I think we first want to just be good or not do what our parents did and then do all the good things that they did, but eventually it comes out. And so put the mess down, clean it up later, you know? And so, yeah, definitely see that on both sides. And we talked about it at first, about the extreme things that we definitely don't want to bring to our family. But as we live and parent, see little things here and there, and we're like, oh. And then you give yourself some room for trial and error. And just try to make it like a practice and a routine to not do those things or to do those things. But yes, 100%.
Yeah.
it comes out.
And would you say it's like also have like different parenting styles and discipline styles because of the way your guys' parents were?
Yeah, I think maybe it's because we agree on a lot of just general things. I don't really know how to explain it in better detail. We like, for example, come from a huge family, whether it's like, I don't know if I could say this, but spanking or like that kind of, there's a hard disciplining actions. We're like, okay, no, right? But like taking something away when you do something wrong, and like, so we have a general rule of how we want to do things.
So then, do you think you guys will get into it? Like, because I lately have been getting into it with like the way I am parenting or the way I have done like my bedtime routine and putting him to sleep, and then like he wants to do differently. My husband wants to do differently.
Right.
Do you get into that, and how do you navigate through like not fighting about it? You know what I mean? Especially you don't want to fight in front of your child at all.
Yeah.
So how do you go through about that?
Number one, grace when you do fight, which I think it will happen. But also eventually I think the more we fight against it, realize, oh, nothing's getting resolved. And so you give each other space to trial and error. And if it's too much, then to step in, whether it's worth the fight, It's like sometimes you kind of have to fight to go against something, like certain actions. So, but most of the time, we usually give each other like trial and error, just space to do our own thing. And then eventually, like naturally, like you tend to kind of do similar things, even though you're two different people. But I think it's a long process. I honestly don't think it's like this is how you do it and it'll work out, because it's a relationship.
It is.
And we all have our baggage, and we all have just pains in the past that just manifests into our family, because our family is the closest to us, And of course, as having little kids, we don't want to expose that to our kids, but there is a lot of grace, I believe. Yeah. I believe there's a lot of grace in just being able to give each other room to try and do your own thing, but also find a way to do something together. And yeah, also just, and also learning how to eventually talk to each other without fighting about each other about differences.
Yeah.
But that also takes time, I believe, because we have our generational or like tendencies of how our parents fought, Someone's a fighter, someone's a fighter, right? And that all comes in to, I think in a relationship before parents, but especially in kids, because we both want the best for our kids.
Of course.
And so people I feel like, or we had a more fighting kind of, I guess, motivation to actually.
It needs to be like your way.
Yeah.
And I get that. I feel the same way. And I think also during this postpartum, I'm now 10 months, almost 11 months postpartum, and I see certain tendencies of mine that were like a long time ago of mine, where whether it's like during teenager time, college time, you fight with your parents, and just all this stuff, and like you have these exes and like everything that you're going through, and you're not really that person, but that person is somewhere deep down inside that comes out when you're not given, I don't know, sleep, love, whatever it is.
Super vulnerable in every way,
So then I feel like during the postpartum time, that little bit can come out of you, and I've noticed that. And it's just, I guess, I hate talking about it, but
Scary.
it's so important to talk about, because then at least like your partner and everybody else around you, it can be even just my mom and my dad, because I can lash out on them. And just talking about it and letting them know that this is really not me.
Right.
But that's so funny that because I'm bringing this up because it's so crazy how that little tendency of yourself and that identity of yourself will come out during these hard times.
Yes.
And parenting is really hard. It's not just what we see in movies and in TV shows. Oh, honey, here's breakfast, and we try it, but in reality, it's so much more than just that. Like the kids don't just go to school and you just have this beautiful life. We try to, but there's so much that goes into it. And I do think, because I know we talked about the identity that we lose in motherhood when we become mothers. I think fathers do too.
Yes.
And I feel the relationship does too.
Yes.
It's like we're trying so hard. I'm trying to think about like how did I used to be before I was
like,
a mom?
I don't even remember myself at all.
Yes, I'm trying
Completely
to
different.
remember. I'm like, dude, I was just like this fun person. I'm still fun, but like in a relationship wise, you know?
Right.
So it's like just trying to get back to that identity, but I do truly believe that the fathers are definitely going through it too.
100%.
So speaking about parenting styles, how do you discipline your kids or how do you teach them certain things? Like, is there a timeout in you guys' household? How is the timeout and what are your thoughts about that?
So I guess this is the funny thing. So I do have, or I want to go into child education, child psychology, and I guess to start this off, I thought, hey, I have experience with kids, and so once I come into motherhood, I will know what to do. Which I was wrong. Again, trial and error. Everything's about trial and error. So right now, the way we discipline our kids is we notice that it's just a takeaway system, but being strict and stern, having that it's like the volume, right? Having the volume go right, like loud enough to like, okay, they're serious, but not go over that volume. But it's mostly we usually do the takeaway method. No iPad, no candy. No iPad, no dessert. And encouraging them to, I think it's one thing to take away, but what I learned from my kids, because I think you can learn a lot more from your kids than us teaching them to be, that's my motto really, is that when I just take away, they only like kind of put themselves down. They think that they're bad kids, you know, and so you always have to have a replacement. It's like, you know, if you don't behave well, you'll take iPad or dessert away. But I'll teach you how to be kind. This is how you can show your sister how she feel loved. She loves hugs, so give her a hug. So always giving them a greater positive than a negative. Has been the thing, because my oldest right now, being 6, is at a very like he does understand what's good, what's bad, and what's bad behavior. But he was like the perfect kid when he was a baby. He never caused any trouble until to be honest, his 2 rebellious siblings came and challenged him and really just, you know, picked at him. And so he's learning how to fight back. And so we're learning that the more we take away from him, the more he just kind of sinks into himself. And so there's a certain point to discipline, but I always feel like it's more important to reinforce it with positive behavior, or at least encourage them or teach them, hey, this is how we can be kind.
Of course, yeah. No, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that. I feel like that's what I would want to do. Right. Especially, so you have 2 toddlers technically right now. Yes. And how is it disciplining and teaching them certain things?
So my youngest is 2. He kind of understands. He wants dessert all the time because his siblings want dessert. So he always goes to the dessert cabinet. He says, I just want candy. And, you know, he always just opens the cabinet and goes, you know, and we say, no, you need to eat food before dessert, for example. And he will scream so that the entire Santa Clara will hear him. Like he's crazy, crazy loud and just cry. And we would, like, honestly, I think for toddlers, you can only tell them this is the rule. And just let them just, you know, kind of figure themselves out. Because you can't really teach a baby much.
Yeah,
you just kind of have to let them like see that that's the rule, but that's it. Whereas once they're older, like my 3-year-old and 6-year-old, you can negotiate and they actually understand, okay, I do have to do this and I can change my behavior. Babies and toddlers just have to get through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was watching this TikTok and she kind of like teaches a lot about like the timeout method.
Yeah.
But the timeout is not like you're in the corner and this is like because you're so bad and this is, you know, what's the
You're doing
word?
the bad word.
Right.
Bad behavior.
Bad behavior.
Right.
And so what she does, she just like kind of sits him on the step and she sits a little further away and she has a timer for like a minute or 2.
Right.
And so it gives the 2-year-old time to kind of like cry it out and then he kind of calms down and he like looks around. Yeah. He's like, oh, I guess it's not that bad. I'm better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Not realizing what just even happened.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is helpful because you like you said, like the 2-year-olds just they don't even know. They just need to like let their emotions out.
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
But
I
different for every kid too.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know what you'll get.
Yeah.
Whichever, say batch, whoever you'll get, you kind of go with their flow. I think every kid is different. So my third is definitely more expressive, and he knows what he wants, and he will cry till he gets it. And so we would do that method. Whereas my second child, it takes her. She just needs to go to like a hidden corner, cry it out, come back, and she say, "I'm sorry." You know. So every child is different. And then my first is just okay, you know, like, all right, fine, you know, and so every kid is different, and every stage is different too, the age too, and so I think it's just really stooping down to their level, doing what we can to be like, hey, this is not good, I have to take it away, I'm sorry, or whatever, and just letting them figure it out in their own pace, and if they need help, we help them, and that's what I'm learning with kids, like, just like any person, we're all different, and in our personalities. And so you kind of have to, just learn each kid.
So that's why, even though like some people will say, "Oh, well, you're third one, or you have so many kids, like you are such a champ, Olympian," but in reality, not really, because every kid is different.
You have 3 different kids.
Yeah, different stages, and trying to just manage the chaos. I do give you a lot of grace and a husband because wow, that's a lot. Because we have one, and I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, whoa.
It's like this is, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But you'll have they're all different colors. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I feel like the oldest one, like you said, is kind of like looking at how you're treating like the other two, and then they can be like, well, why am I not being treated this way? Why do I not get this?
Say it all the time. We'd say, good job eating your food. How come you didn't tell me good job eating your food? We're like, oh my goodness. You know, just chaos all around. But
it's a beautiful chaos.
It is beautiful chaos. Yeah. We're all surviving.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
So being in this beautiful chaos, what would you say is best advice for yourself and any other mom out there that's also in this beautiful chaos?
Yes. I would say at least pick one, whether it's small or whatever you can do at that time in this whatever stage you are in your life as a new mom or as a mom, to do one thing, small thing for yourself. And I know that's a very hard thing to do because I started I didn't do it all 3 years or with my first 2 kids. I just started again to do something for myself, and so I completely understand, but I think it is very good to just find one small thing. If not, at least really focusing on the relationship with you and your partner. That way, eventually further down the road, you don't get this like shock of, oh my goodness, like how are we roommates and what happened, and then it gets much harder to kind of work on it, and so take care of yourself and take care of each other, I would say. And it's really hard to focus on each other, but to really try to prioritize you and your relationship with your partner and yourself once in a while. I know with the kids, it's so easy to want to do that for the kids, but to do that prior.
So we have a question from the previous mom to you, and the question is, as a new parent, what were you good at and what do you wish you were better at?
To be honest, I don't think I was really good at it at all in the beginning. So as a new time mom, I feel like I really wasn't good at anything. I didn't know anything about being a mom. It was all question marks over my head. I thought that I would be good at it because I studied child education. I wanted to go into teaching, and I was like, oh, kids, it'll be a no-brainer. But no, this new identity as a mom was a very big new thing for me. So I do wish I knew more of I just wish I had more community. That really was the end of it. I wish that I had more mom friends and just people to grow with.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know why I felt so lonely sometimes. I didn't know why I was so angry sometimes, or I was so down on myself sometimes. And I was like, is this hormones? I knew none of that. It was something that I found out afterwards, and everyone started talking about it, which I thought is an amazing thing. What you're doing is absolutely amazing because I wish I had that. So yeah, it's just the whole yeah.
Well, thank you for being here and
Yes.
being that person
Oh,
for other moms
no, thank you for
and
having
for
me.
me.
Yeah.
No, of course, because yeah, it is very hard. I remember always just going into shower. I mean, I was very blessed to have a partner that would take care of the baby in the newborn stage, and I was able to take a shower every day, and I thought that was my self-care for the day, which it was. And I would just cry, and I didn't understand why I was crying, and you know, it has to do with the identity, it has to do with your hormones, and just like all these different things that you're going through. Obviously, it's so rough and it's so hard, but that's something I always tell new mom friends that are becoming moms. I'm like, just if you're crying, just let it
happen. Let it happen.
Enjoy it. You're gonna feel so much better after. You know, like don't worry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want you to know, and I hope that you don't have any mom guilt about how you used to, you know, feel about yourself, because obviously you're an amazing mom. You have 3 wonderful children, and you're doing amazing things for the community, and you're a great mom friend. And so I think you're doing amazing.
Oh, thank you.
What would be a question that you would want to ask the next mom?
I think my question would be, if you had the chance to do one thing for yourself, just for yourself, something that would make you feel like you got a little part of your identity back, what would it be?
Ooh.
Maybe a bigger question than we thought.
Yeah.
Then we're like, what did I really like?
I'm like, I don't even have the answer.
What's your answer? You know?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I
thank you
really
for having
appreciate
me.
you and for sharing and being vulnerable. Thank you so much for joining me today and being part of this conversation. If you found this episode helpful or inspiring, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. Your support truly helps other mamas find us. And of course, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and become part of our village so you never miss a new episode. We're all in this together. Until next time, mamas, take care and bye for now.